Is Oleksandr Usyk ready for Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua? Or is he just the best super cruiserweight in the world? This is After the Bell, Mirror Fighting's boxing show in association with Betfair.
David Hay is the WBA heavyweight champion of the world!
Float like a butterfly and sting like a bee.
The Mirror brings you After the Bell in association with Betfair.
Welcome to this week's show. I'm Martin Domin, joined by George Groves and Declan Taylor. Please do subscribe, rate, give me a thumbs up wherever you're watching or listening to this show. We are, of course, going to focus on Oleksandr Usyk's victory over Derek Chisora on Saturday night, a points victory in the end. We'll then talk briefly about Savannah Marshall's world title victory, but Lee Selby's world title eliminator defeat. And then in part two, have a look at the super featherweight / lightweight division, which really is burgeoning right now as Gervonta Davis knocked out Leo Santa Cruz with a stunning uppercut in the 6th round of their clash. And we'll just bring in a bit of Devin Haney as well, who is in action next weekend. But first things first, we all said Oleksandr Usyk would beat Derek Chisora. We predicted the fight this week. George, I'll come to you first. What did you like? I'm assuming you liked his performance, but what did you like about Usyk's performance on Saturday night?
Yeah, Usyk, Usyk boxed very well. So he's settling into the heavyweight division. Like that was what was the concern that was raised by, the Chisora team, by David Hay in particular, was that Chisora is a big man, a big guy. He's naturally probably close to 3 stone heavier than him on the night. And how's Usyk going to cope and deal with that? So at the start, if you're an Usyk fan or you got some money on Usyk, beginning early or late, it's heart in your mouth moments for a little bit because he needs to settle the bigger guys in front of him, I feel. So for the first 2 rounds, it was almost like a risky tactic where he was burning up a lot of energy, maybe not as much as Derek Chisora, but he was definitely burning up a lot of energy for a big guy who's now carrying around, a bit of extra weight that he's brought up from the cruiserweight division. He pulling out high a lot of the time, and someone like Derek Chisora who punches so long, he throws them from the hips. He's a bit of a gunslinger at times, but he'll happily change stance to get even more range and reach on his big loopy, hooky shots. And you don't know whether they're going to come downstairs or he's going to change it to an upstairs, hook where you can come left side, right side. They are sort of, you can see them coming if you're a fighter like Usyk, but as I say, if you're pulling up high and you try to catch it with that, with just an arm defense, or a hand defense, then the odd one can go through. And they did in the first couple of rounds. A couple hit him on the chest. 1 or 2 did land on the button. I think Usyk's got a great chin, but obviously we're talking about heavyweight division. After that, once the sort of the pace does settle and the fighters are sort of engaged and they're trying to find their rhythm within the fight, this is kind of where he goes into his own. And, you can see that for large periods of the fight, he just dictated the pace, entirely. So he would see the shots coming. He would slip inside Chisora's long shots, which at times is kind of dangerous, but he just, he's got his front leg loaded, his weight's on the front leg, he slips inside, almost like his stablemate Lomachenko does, create an angle, and at times he made Chisora look really amateurish, where he would just sort of miss and go flying into the ropes. I thought he boxed really well, really, really well. Come, by the midway through the fight, I thought it was, it was his to lose. In the 7th round, he pretty much had Chisora finished. The bell possibly saved him, and Chisora, in my opinion, like he wasn't getting the best advice in the corner, and obviously their game plan was to just keep applying pressure, hope to land on Chisora, and just try and stay with him. I saw in the build-up Chisora saying that when Usyk likes to pull away, in the second half of the fight, we're going to have to keep pace with him. The corner, I think, Chisora's corner was under the impression that he was winning the rounds, and I didn't feel that was the case. I know Tony Bellew ringside was screaming, and he thought he was winning the rounds. Eddie Hearn had it, going either way. But for me, I scored it, put out a tweet on the night. I gave Usyk 9-3, and the 3 rounds that he lost, Again, probably the first. I think it was. I can't remember now. I've got the card, but second, and maybe one in the middle. But he was probably anticipating that second wave, that last sort of onslaught from Chisora in, the championship rounds, which came and went. And in the 11th, I thought he started to land again. Probably could have put his foot on the gas and tried to finish Chisora off, but didn't need to. A very good performance, but against a guy, same sort of stature in terms of height, even though I think he's given away reach. I haven't got the statistics here. And definitely giving away some natural size. But off that performance, I think he put him in there with anyone, but whether he's going to be big enough with his style to deal with a Tyson Fury, I'm not sure. But I also cryptically tweeted last night that I make him the best pound-for-pound heavyweight in the world. So I think I said it on the show the other week as well, maybe after the show. Sent some people into outrage. They couldn't fathom what I said, because I said he's the best pound-for-pound heavyweight, but not the best heavyweight. That's Tyson Fury. Obviously referring to the fact that Tyson Fury is 6'9" and 19 stone. So, but technically a very, very good fighter who moves around nice, neat, nimbly, has a much higher repertoire of shots compared to the other heavyweights in the division. And I think he's going to win a world title next year, whether that be a vacant WBO world title or maybe not, but he's still going to win a world title next year. Cryptic again.
Of course. Of course, plenty of discussion around about what's next. But Dick, what did, before we get on to specifics, your general feelings during and after the fight?
Yeah, it was much the same as George, really. Although I thought it was reasonably easy score to fight. A reasonably easy fight to score. I don't know why there was any sort of scream up whatsoever. And Eddie tweeted right after saying, "Oh, people are split here." I'm like, how are people split? I thought it was pretty straightforward. Like, Chisora, yeah, he won a couple of rounds at the start. I think I had him 3-1 up after 4. And then it was basically, he tired, didn't he? He really put the pressure on early and he couldn't maintain the pace. And like George said, he might have got lucky at that, in those early rounds coming out like that. But then the gamble is that you put it all in early on and then you're knackered. And especially with Usyk, who's never stopping, his feet are so good that you're always under pressure. The way he punches, the way, obviously from Southport, which for a start, Derek Chisora at Southport, I've covered him a lot over the years. I'm pretty sure I've never seen him at Southport, so that was quite fun for however long it lasted. But the way he feints with the backhand and then lands these little sneaky hooks on the button every time and just spins out of the way. And Chisora's just sort of got this look on his face like, what's happening here? And when he was sitting down in between rounds, he's sort of obviously blowing and you could just imagine how frustrating that must be, especially for someone like him who just wants to get on your chest and just unload as much as possible. He just couldn't do it. And yeah, I thought there was a couple of risky, shaky moments for Usyk, and you wonder, wow, okay, is this going to take it out of him? And it didn't. I guess it was kind of a little bit like that in the Bellew fight at the start, where he wasn't like masterful in the early rounds against Bellew, and he lost a couple and he got caught a couple of times, but then he took over, and it was kind of similar in a slightly different way. But in terms of what the point of that fight was for Usyk, as in like a proper introduction to the heavyweight division, it was just about perfect. And Derek Chisora is more than a gatekeeper, but that position he holds as someone who's been there and done it and will never give anyone an easy night and can knock people out, it was the perfect one for Usyk to sort of introduce himself as a heavyweight, find his feet a little bit, and then now look around and see, right, who could he realistically beat? And I think, neck on the line, I think he beats every heavyweight apart from Fury. And I think he'll win that vacant belt, and I think he'll hold on to it for a long time.
You mentioned the scoring there. I mean, 2 judges did have it. Basically, one, if they'd scored one of their rounds to Chisora instead of Usyk, we would have had a draw, which is like, I know, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they could have done that.
Yeah.
I agree with you on the scoring, but it was quite close to being very controversial. I think, speaking to Sky to speak to Tony Bellew and Dave Caldwell afterwards, both of whom have a vested interest or a friendship with Bellew, you're always going to get what they got, but it was
I
It's
think
a bit strange, actually.
it's one of those as well. Not only, we hear a lot about the crowd influencing judges, but actually when there's no crowd, all you could hear, Chisora has got this big entourage out of nowhere, like a lot of MMA guys, and obviously he's got Hay and he's got, people there. They're making loads of noise. Every time he does anything, there was loads of noise, and obviously nothing from Usyk. So yeah, there's no crowd, but actually judges can still be influenced by that. Eddie Hearn certainly influenced by that. And I think it was one of those where Chisora was doing better than many people expected, and he was still in there at points, and he was still hitting back. So then you could be tempted to go, oh, he's done well in that round. Okay, maybe I'll give him that round. He's done better than I expected. He's not totally out on his feet. He's come back a bit than what he does. But for me, I thought it was pretty straightforward. I thought it was pretty clear, one-handedly, and therefore just about a perfect night. Didn't get clipped at all. I mean, Usyk anyway. Chisora looked like George mentioned, he could have got stopped at the end of the seventh. He was seemed to be really badly buzzed. And it's just that volume of punches, isn't it? He's not like a massive puncher, but they just come and then he's gone and then he's on you again. And I think it's going to make for some real interesting fights, even though he's smaller. And to be honest, he will grow now. I mean, weight-wise, he'll put some on. I'm sure he will. He's going to have to bulk up a bit, but that takes time, especially at his age.
Mm.
Yeah. I mean, also, if you look at... Sorry, George, you want to come in?
Yeah, no, again, with the scoring, I was so shocked that it was so close, 2 rounds in it, because there was I mean, Bellew, I know Bellew is an emotional guy, and he's definitely got a connection. I don't know if he does advise Derek or they're just real good friends, and Caldwell probably follows Bellew's lead. But some of the stuff, like at the end, just goes to show, again, maybe with no crowds, just how invested you can be, because Bellew said that he couldn't understand how Chisora had lost when he was throwing and landing 3-1 in terms of the shots. Chisora was throwing compared to Usyk, and I was thinking, what happened there? Because Chisora's never thrown a 2-punch combination, and Usyk throws 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 punch combinations, and that he's always got that little peppery jab that comes out from the southpaw stance. I think a large part of the success in the second half of the fight was for Chisora was just that period, that half a round where he did go southpaw, and Usyk was sort of thought, I don't like to look at this, and scratch his head and wait a little bit. They're probably expecting a big loopy shot to come in and a change of stance where it maybe be a big left hook where you finish in an orthodox stance. But I thought I was wondering at that point. I thought for me it was a pretty easy, solid win for Usyk. Good win for him, where he now knows he's got the proof in the pudding that he's in there with someone who is more than a gatekeeper in the heavyweight division. In Chisora, held his own, took a few shots along the way, had a rough ride in terms of the physicality of it, but controlled the pace, which is what it's always going to be about for him, and then got his good work off and hurt Chisora as well. So I thought there can't be a sticky decision here. But Eddie Hearn, I never thought he's ever been particularly good at scoring a fight. It was a bit bizarre at the end, but I thought a conclusive win. I thought 9-3 was more than fair reflection of Chisora's effort, because there's periods for Chisora. Like, I think one thing that he works on, and this is my humble opinion, would be he's a dangerous fighter, but when it's not that front foot all out sort of assault, he's not dangerous when he wants to take a breather. And every fighter wants to do that. Doesn't matter whether you're heavyweight or not. There should be periods where he's still active, but taking a breather. And it was sort of like when he wasn't, trying to march forward, let his hands go, his hands sort of rested on his chest. He stood upright. There was times where he was almost walking away. And then because he's trying to take a breather and he's in a vulnerable position, Usyk's just pressing him now, and he's letting his hands go, and he's landing shots, and they're having an effect. So that would be, a way for Chisora definitely to make that improvement, would be to have that danger element to him when he's taking a breather, being active, even if it's just masked behind a bit of head movement, a bit of posturing, a bit of feints, and definitely getting his jab going. But I've sort of gone off point as always, but good performance from Usyk. Very, very good performance from Usyk. I agree. I mean, I think he wins a vacant belt next year. I can't see how the Joshua fight makes sense commercially for Joshua. But I think he's going to settle into the division. I think there won't be many out there to beat him.
They're talking about, I believe Frank Warren's column in the Daily Star on Saturday was about trying to make the winner of Dubois against Joyce for that vacant belt, were it to be vacated. And for me, don't care who wins that, they ain't beating Usyk, I don't think. So, yeah.
Well,
I mean,
I
I'd
think...
like to see it. But I'd rather see the winner of that one fight Chisora, to be honest, and then look for someone like Usyk. But I don't see how either of them beat Usyk at the moment.
If I'm Usyk's team, Usyk's corner, I agree. I'm making the favourite, but they're probably the two heavyweights out there to necessarily not be in a rush to fight, because Dubois just he's such an explosive, powerful fighter, and he only takes one shot in the heavyweight division. As cliche as that sounds, and then having someone like Joyce who does can just march forward, not necessarily the best to look at, but if you don't have the punch power to slow him down or keep him off, he might end up being a hard night's work. When you want someone to settle into a pace like Usyk does, I think he could end up having a tougher night's work against a Joe Joyce and an easier night's work against, say, a Dillian White. It's one of them. It's that super cruiserweight division. Who knows?
Get it started.
So the situation is, at the moment, Anthony Joshua at the moment must fight Oleksandr Usyk or give up his WBO title, unless Usyk says, "I'll wait and let him fight Tyson Fury." But then even then, there's no real point, because as long as Fury Joshua 1 is close enough, or goes a few rounds and ends the stoppage, they'll do it again. So Usyk wait until 2022 before he'd fight either of them, or the WBO come and say, "Joshua, Fury, do your thing, and then we'll deal with it after." If you're Oleksandr Usyk, George, is there any consideration to wait and see what happens, or are you absolutely adamant that your next fight will be for the WBO world title?
Yeah, no, if I'm him, I'd be adamant to fight for the WBO world title. As you say, you never know what's around the corner and what delays could take place. You want to become a full world champion, and then you just know that them fights are there for you, and if you've got to wait 2 years, you're having tick-over fights as a world champion, with the status of it and the prestige and probably the money to go with it as well. I think he backs himself. I genuinely think he backs himself. I think if they made Joshua versus Usyk, tomorrow, and that's the next fight for Joshua, I think Usyk definitely wouldn't shy away from it. It would back himself against Joshua, and in many ways, who wants to pick that fight? But I think. Fights are going to start stacking up in the heavyweight division, and then the WBO will put it out, and it might be a Dubois. If Dubois comes through Joyce, it might be Usyk Dubois. I think both fighters would certainly be up for that. I can't see how Dubois would want to delay or step away from that sort of fight. So. I see it going vacant, and then Usyk going for a vacant belt.
I don't think that if that fight with Fury, if there's no WBO belt on the line, I don't think it makes a single pound's worth of difference commercially. It makes the exact same money whether they got it on the line or not. And the fact is, they risk that colossal payday, even if it's just on pay-per-view and there's no gate. They risk that if he fights Usyk. It could go down the pan and could be gone forever then, because you don't know what then happens with Fury and what happens next. So I see him vacating it. As much as Joshua would back himself to win, and I'm sure his team would, I don't think people like Eddie Hearn and stuff would necessarily do that, and it doesn't make any business sense for him to fight Usyk and instead of Fury. So if the Fury fight looks like it is going to happen next for him after Pulev, surely he's going to drop it. Surely he's going to drop it and fight Fury for all the belts -1, and then go from there. The amount of money, especially these days, because you just don't know what's going to happen, do you? And Usyk, and it's brilliant manoeuvring from Usyk to get himself in this position already as a heavyweight, where he's going to be fighting. You know, he's done it. It's done the perfect route, and he's going to end up fighting for a vacant belt, and then he's going to hold on to it and make some serious money.
Well, that is a WBO. Sorry, Martin. It's a WBO rule, yeah. That if you're world champion and you move up, you're automatically in line. You might have to fight for a mandatory position, but you're straight in at a mandatory position. So, yeah, definitely a clever move if you want a quick ride into the heavyweight. You know,
yeah, he's definitely. It's worked out well for him, to be fair. You know, last year. I mean, I guess he would rather have fought earlier this year, but as it's worked out, pretty perfect. Do you think Frank Warren does put Dubois in? I mean, listen, we absolutely should not count Joe Joyce out of that fight. But you know, if Dubois comes through, does Frank Warren put him in? He's golden goose.
I sort of feel like he does, and I feel like Frank has got to the point where he's got no massive interest now in hanging around with people. I think he was getting to that point anyway, and the pandemic and everything has changed all that and made that even more an obvious thing to do now. What's the point of hanging around? They did it too long with Billy Joe Saunders, and in the end, Saunders has left him, albeit mutually and whatever, but now he's gone his way, and he never had that massive fight with Saunders. They won the world title, and they had some good nights and stuff, but they never had the one that maybe an undefeated middleweight world champion like Billy Joe Saunders deserved, or you would think someone in his position would have, and it never happened. So I feel like if he wins, he does. I don't know why he would bang the drum for it now. I feel like at heavyweight, there's only so much sort of learning you can do, if you know what I mean. And I think he's done a lot of it already. Okay, he's still very inexperienced and certainly very young in heavyweight terms. But, you know, if he goes and beats Joe Joyce, does a number on him, I don't think they'll be looking at Usyk and thinking, no, we shouldn't do that. And also, even if he loses to Usyk, it's not the end of the world. Yeah, I feel like they would. And certainly, if Joyce wins, it's an absolute no-brainer for them, because he's not getting any younger and he's already boxed him. You know, he knows what he's about, and he definitely fancies chances. Like George said, it looks like if you can put Usyk under pressure for a long, long time and he doesn't hurt you, you've got a good chance. Chisora just couldn't keep the pressure on long enough, but someone like Joyce maybe could. But I mean, it's great, isn't it? Because it looked like it was just Joshua, Fury, Wilder, but now actually it's all opening up in other ways as well. And it's good to see, because we haven't seen the massive fights we want just yet outside of Wilder and Fury.
Definitely a big 2021 for Usyk. As for Chisora, I mean, from what he said, he certainly intends to carry on. Again, we talk about the WBO belt, but it's quite possible that over the next sort of 12 to 18 months, all the belts in the heavyweight division sort of become a bit fragmented. Anything can happen. So maybe Chisora can then pick his way to a world title shot. I don't know, but would a better option, George, maybe just to, for the last part of his career, get back into those fan-friendly fights without fans at the moment, but fights where he's a bit more comfortable.
Well, yeah, I mean, he can box on for as long as he wants. I've got to try and say it without sounding bitter as not a heavyweight. Derek Chisora, he's in double digits for losses now, but everyone's going to be excited about his next fight because they're heavyweights. No doubt he'll maybe drop down. He would have to drop down a level from Usyk, but even if it's in with someone unheard of, he'll go in as a chief support on a pay-per-view card or something along those lines, and everyone will be excited, and he's still got that value. It'll be around selling point, and if he's still working with the likes of David Hay and that, there's that added value added there. So I think he's a clever guy, Chisora, and I feel like on reflection, he'll probably look at the Usyk fight and think, I doubt he'll, stamp his flag in the ground and state that he did win that, like he said immediately after. Because it's hard as the fighter, if your corner in particular telling you you've won the fight, and then a couple of your pals ringside are adamant that you've won the fight, then you might feel a bit hard done by. But I think he just likes being in the gym at the moment. He's enjoying training. Must be getting really good money. Probably more money now than he was when he was coming through and fighting for world titles. He has no real desire to fight for a world title, I don't think. He sort of pushed himself out of that situation. Before, in the build-up to this fight, I saw him talking about wanting to obviously win and then fight Tyson Fury because he's only his third fight. And it's like, them two have boxed twice already. It just shows you how mental this sport can be. If you ask even not serious boxing fans, but boxing fans, tell us about the Chisora Fury fights. I didn't even know they did box. When was that? They wouldn't be able to name the year, wouldn't be able to name what the titles were on the line and how the fight went, because they just went under the radar. And it just shows you how times have changed now. Both them fighters are huge names now. Fury in particular. So I think as a heavyweight, there's plenty of fights out there for him. He took a few heavy shots, but I think conditioning wise, he's still in pretty good nick, and at 36, 37, he's definitely got a few more fights left in him if he wants it and he has the desire to do it. But yeah, the value's there, isn't it? He's a heavyweight. The value's there. There's plenty of fights out there that you could pitch him in against, and people are going to want him as a scalp, even though he's got a lot of losses. People are going to want him as a scalp, and good for him. Good for him. Hope he'll carry on as long as he wants to and has the desire to, and can earn good money out of it.
Yeah, I mean, Chisora Fury would be one of the strangest trilogies of all time. I can't see.
Well, to be honest, if you think about the names that we're seeing linked to Fury, actually, Chisora is not the maddest one. That is more sellable than half the other people on it, like Ajit Kabayel. For the everyday casual boxing fan, for instance. So you can sort of see what he's talking about, and it's the sort of one that Fury would be like, yes, please, because he knows he's going to have no problem with him. He's absolutely got his number. So yeah, I said gatekeeper earlier was harsh, but he is sort of that elite gatekeeper. He's like, if you beat him, you can then go into the next bit. But he's lost to people like Pulev. He's obviously lost twice to Dillian White, Oleksandr Usyk. So he hasn't ever been able to get a win against a top level heavyweight, but he beat Carlos Takam, knocked out Shpilka, so he's there, but he's not quite there. But that area can make a lot of money. Can make a lot of money still. And I think that's what, like George said, he's very, very intelligent, very smart. He's seen it all, the worst side of boxing, the good side. He's hated it. He's fallen out of love with it. He's loved it again. I think he's in a good spot still, even at his age. And there was never any mention either that it was make or break, and if you lose, you got to retire in this fight. It was never that, and it won't be like that for him for a long time. I don't think. I think he plows on and carries on, and he's always going to be an entertaining fight.
A pay-per-view main event pay-per-view without ever winning a heavyweight world title, without winning a world title. For boxing fans, they'll Usyk is Usyk versus Chisora. Usyk's the A side of the card, but he's not. It's Chisora because it's in Britain. It's on British pay-per-view, and it's not for a world title. It doesn't matter what it's for because it's pay-per-view. So Chisora, he's sort of kind of A side of a pay-per-view card. He's making good money. He's getting more than most in this particular time. And there's plenty of heavyweights out there that are exactly the same. So that's good. That's the scary thing, is it'd be difficult to walk away from those sort of situations. But at the same time, as long as he's feeling good and he's got the right people around him to look after him, if he ever just starts to not put it in anymore in the gym or whatnot, or he has just a dip off in performance, they can say, right, Derek, this is the time. But other than that, he, as you say, he's a fantastic opponent, which is, again, it's not the right expression for someone like Chisora because he's better than an opponent, but he is, because he's been around for so long. He's a big name. He's charismatic. He's cool. He's interesting for fans. He's fan friendly. People want to fight him because they want to be part of it.
I skipped over these. after we were talking about Usyk, but let me just run through Betfair's odds on his future fights. So they have Usyk as the favourite against Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, 2-1 on and 4-11 respectively.
Whoa. You say he's the favourite to beat Tyson Fury?
No, sorry.
I was going to say then, I was about to get my wallet out.
Okay, Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury are the 1-2 and 4-11 favourites respectively to beat Oleksandr Usyk. Usyk is then the favourite against Deontay Wilder, Daniel Dubois and Joe Choice. I guess you disagree with Anthony Joshua, but otherwise...
Yeah, I think it's an intriguing fight, the Joshua one, because it'd be interesting to see what he does, because obviously he boxed in the Ruiz rematch for a reason. But you would expect him to go in there and try and knock someone like Usyk out, just try and pin him down and just get to him, and like early on, a bit like what Chisora did, and hope to have more success. And he does finish really well. Look what he did against Povetkin, for instance. You know, if he got Usyk going, he would see him off, I'm sure. But then when you do that, you become the bull, don't you? And he's a good old matador as Usyk. You might just try and pick him off and box him and make him look stupid at times. But can he do it for 12 rounds against Joshua? That's the real intriguing one. I don't find Usyk Fury, I can't see that being a particularly entertaining fight, to be honest. I just see Fury just boxing and keeping it long, maybe putting his foot down a little bit late on, or when he gets the opportunities. But that Joshua fight is a real hard one to call for me. I would if I was putting money on it, especially if he's the underdog, there'd be good value in an Usyk win. But yeah, I think I would love that fight.
Yeah, I would agree. I guess that's in terms of Fury, George. That's where it plays into your description of pound for pound. Like pound for pound, you imagine everybody's the same weight, and then if they all box, then who would win? But
yeah, I mean,
almost
yeah, like similar weight, similar size. You know, I think Usyk's style for his size, he will struggle a touch in the heavyweight division because he needs the guys in front of him to settle. And then acclimatise to his timing. But he likes guys to punch at him. And sometimes in the heavyweight division, that doesn't happen. To get off his good work, he's not a strict, aggressive counter-puncher, but his weight is on the front foot a lot of the time. He likes to slip and take angles, countering off the guy's shots in front of him. And then if you put him in with someone like Tyson Fury, I just don't see how Tyson Fury will let him get into a fight in that way, because Tyson's so big. He's got, he's got high repertoire of shots. He has different, you can change stances at times, and even when he doesn't quite get the fundamentals right, and he makes really naive errors at times because he's so big. He's always going to get away with it, especially against guys in the heavyweight division who he's much quicker than. So even if they've got the size, they don't have the speed to match. So I can't see how Usyk's style can be particularly effective with someone like Tyson Fury, because you're not going to be able to gravitate and move around the ring, wait for the guy to walk into range and then make him miss and hit on him, because Fury could easily just keep it at double distance and land the long shots and not let Usyk into range. Can Joshua do that? Joshua's a totally different type of fighter. Much more muscular and a ferocious puncher, like a huge, heavy hitting puncher, but likes to box that sort of typical textbook, neat and tidy, hands high, upright, technique, where someone like Usyk might be able to pull that apart, to encourage Joshua to punch when he doesn't want to punch, and then to take angles and punch off it. All these guys hit hard enough to hurt each other. I know Tyson Fury got off the floor against Deontay Wilder, but he's been down numerous times in his career. Joshua, has been hurt. If you go back to the fight with Joshua against not Pulev, the Russian, I forgot his name right now.
Povetkin. Yeah,
Povetkin, sorry. So you go back to the fight where Joshua Povetkin, where he's punching down at someone, but Povetkin's got that amateur pedigree where he can create the angles and punch off it. once Joshua landed, the fight was over. He's just such a monster puncher, big guy. But Povetkin did cause him the odd problems that he had to deal with and overcome. And I think Usyk is a sharper, faster, fresher version of Povetkin. He's only 33. Povetkin, he's older. Been through the mill, been stopped by Klitschko at that point. So I think it's a very interesting fight, Usyk versus Joshua. If I had a lot of money on it, I'd probably have my heart in my mouth at times, because I probably would put my money on Usyk, but knowing that one mistake, it could be game over, and he does take shots. It does take a few rounds to get settled. Even against Chisora, to be fair, I thought he was taking too many shots in the first round. Looked uncomfortable, was complaining to the ref about a couple of low blows that looked like they were on the belt. And is he ready for the rough and ready type of fights that he might be facing in the heavyweight division against big guys? And if Joshua gets his tactics right, presses and don't get hit, and then imposes his size, and it's only going to take one or two shots to go through the target and have an effect, and it might just totally change the fight in his hands. So be a tough one to call. Definitely a tough one to call. But I'd probably favour Usyk in that fight. And probably get a lot of stick for it, but that'd be that.
Well, hopefully the stars will align in the months and years to come for that one. I do want to just mention Savannah Marshall's performance. Arguably, I'd say that one of the best performance of the night in stopping Hannah Rankin in the 7th round. It's been, a tricky year for Savannah. Of course, initially, I think, supposed to fight for a world title at light heavyweight up in Newcastle back in the start of the year. This one down at middleweight, obviously a different opponent behind closed doors. But certainly, Dick, I was impressed. I assume you were impressed. Punch perfect.
Best performance of her career by some stretch, and against the best opponent that she's faced in her career. Been frustrating watching her a bit, because there is just such a dearth of good opponents in women's boxing, especially higher up the weights. And then you can struggle to look good because you never have, you cruise a bit and you coast a bit, and even in your training camps, that you haven't really got to get out of second gear to win your fight on the weekend or whatever. This one was a little bit different, and Hannah Rankin came with desire, and there was obviously a world title on the line. And as it happened, as we would have expected, that brought the best out of Savannah Marshall, and it was a great performance. She moves like Huey Fury, doesn't it? It's clear that she's in that camp with Peter. Angles, elusive, slick, can punch. You don't see many stoppages in women's boxing just because of the length of the round. And now that fight with Claressa Shields is massive. Still the only person ever to beat Shields a long time ago. Both done a lot of growing, a lot of improving. And they've got a common opponent now in Rankin. It's what women's boxing needs. And it's great for British women's boxing, because Nicola Adams retired and people like that. And, it's good to have someone like her, the amateur world champion, now world champion in professional ranks, now someone who would have a selling point in that fight with Shields, if nothing else. It sounds a bit disrespectful, but that's an easy one to sell. Marketable women's boxing is what we need. And great. It's a wonderful fight with Shields. American and a Brit, world titles on the line. Happy days. Great night for her. And Hannah Rankin was good as well, but it was just not good enough to keep her off.
Women's boxing, obviously, if you want to say benefited possibly from these last few months, definitely come to the fore more than we might have expected had we not had this situation. And of course, of course. And I think everyone should just accept that. But as Eddie Hearns, if he gets in at the ground level as he has, then it's much easier to build and much cheaper. And of course, in a couple of weeks, there is a card dominated by women, not all women, but with Katie Taylor, Terry Harper, etc. But you're right about that lack of a rivalry. And because it is cheaper to have women's boxing and the fight should be easier to make, it would really be a mistake, George, if we don't see Marshall and Shields, whether it's soon or whether it's maybe when they do need fans. I don't know, but it'd be a missed opportunity.
Yeah, definitely it'll be a great fight. You know, they do come few and far between. You know, at the moment, it's still a growing sport, female boxing. Um, I mean, interesting fact. I don't know. Is it? Have we got more female world champions at the moment than we have male world champions? Try to have a little count up because, and even then, this is just me being miserable. It's like,
That's not like you.
well, yeah, we don't want. You know, you don't want to. World champion is a special thing. You know, a special thing, but you kind of want to earn the right to have one. And then the more world champions you get, the less significant it will feel. So we just need more women's boxing to sort of dilute that out a little bit, which is great because the women are definitely prepared to fight each other. You know, which can't always be said for some of the top names out there in the men's division. Maybe because they have to because of the depth of competition that they have. But I was having to think about all the world champions. Like Cameron won the world title recently. Harper's still world champion. Taylor's not. Katie Taylor's not British, but we try and adopt her from time to time. We try and find our Irish roots. She's definitely a huge name.
Rachel will be boxing for a vacant one against Ebony Bridges on that undercard. I believe that's for a world title. You're right though, George. It is a bit. Although it sounds great, actually, when you scratch the surface a bit, it's a bit kind of.
Well, I mean, like rankings record, I think was she 9-4, 11-4, might even be less than that. So then it's not a world championship record as such. You can have loss on your record, but just because they're only a handful of fights, less than a dozen fights or whatnot. And the same with Savannah Marshall. She's only had a handful of fights as such, and they're in there. They've got to do it. This is what's going to happen until we have the depth in the women's divisions. Concentrate on the fights, really. I think it's great to have world champions, but it's going to be the fights that take you through, and you just don't want it to suffer from it end up being in a situation where you got men's multiple world champions who in the same division that hold practically the same belt, which is a bit bizarre, but great performance from Marshall. I think
you're right though, because when you talk about a world champion, you're just talking about the number one in the division in that weight class, and actually to establish yourself as a woman is far easier or less complicated than that is in the men's, just because of the level of talent. It's a bit like in the amateurs when you might box once, you might just only have to box in the final to win Southern Counties, to win the junior championships at your weight, or the development champs, but just because there's not that many boxers at your weight class and you're still the national champ, but in another weight class you might have had to box 6 times to get there, but actually you've only had to box twice. For instance, a bit like Savannah Marshall, she could clearly say, I'm the best in the division, therefore I am world champion. But just look at what a male boxer would have to have done to get to that level. I don't think anyone's trying to lie about that, but the fact is they're so easy to just get a world title on the belt, on the line, because I guess the sanctioning bodies are like, sweet, yeah, just give us the sanction fee, we'll take it for anything. Yeah, that sounds good enough to me. And that's not to take away from Savannah Marshall, because for me, she is arguably number one in the division, therefore world champion. But I'm with you on that, George. It's just a little bit, maybe we just need to forget that just for a bit and just enjoy the quality of fights, because to be honest, they've been incredible since boxing has come back.
Indeed, a good way to end on that one. And just finally on this card, Lee Selby dropped a decision to George Kambosos, which was a final eliminator for the IBF lightweight title, now held by Teofimo Lopez. I would be very surprised if Lopez takes that fight. Kambosos, of course, says he wants to do it in Australia next year with fans, but I'm not sure there's much in it for Lopez unless he's short of options, which would then leave Kambosos free to fight for the vacant title. But in terms of Lee Selby, I would argue since Josh Warrington beat him, he hasn't looked particularly brilliant, and it's very difficult now to see where he goes from there.
He's up at lightweight now, and everyone knew it was such a struggle for him to make featherweight, and then any sort of dips in his performance on fight night, you'd always equate to, the starvation probably that he went through and the effort that he had to put on his body to make the weight, and then fading. He was susceptible at times to not being able to sustain what he start with to carry it on right the way through to the championship rounds. Moving up to lightweight, you thought that would be being able to correct that, but I feel like it's still part of his performance where it's just his style of fighting. It's hard to sustain and maintain at the top end for the entire fight, and he doesn't have enough punch power really to sort of keep the guys in front of him honest in the lightweight setup. And it's a great division with loads of huge big fights out there for him. But I think he's ranked number 1 now, still with the WBO. Well, no, he probably would have dropped down now, actually, obviously, after the weekend. But before the weekend, he's ranked with the WBO. He's a great fighter, a great servant for British boxing. I'm not sure what his plans are now, whether, losing at this stage, whether he feels how he feels about it, or whether he's still in love with boxing and this is what he wants to do. Obviously, there's fights out there with, if Campbell comes through Garcia next weekend and, the world title ain't going to happen for him straight away. That's a great domestic fight. But then some of the other guys in the division, when you look at, Devin Haney, Lomachenko, Javonte Davis, if he's up at lightweight, they're tough fights. They're hard fights. I'm not sure what he'll be up for, whether he's just enjoying his boxing still and just take over and see when the phone rings, what's available.
Heck, I mean, it's not really for us to non-boxers to say you should do this, that, or the next thing. But if you're Lee Selby,
I think I see him carrying on. Boxing's his life. Him and his brother, lifetime in boxing. Lives and breathes it. I was speaking to Jamie Cox this week and he trains with Tony Borg in that camp, and he just says he's the most consummate professional he's ever seen. And Jamie's seen a lot of them. I don't see him walking away from the sport after this. Like George said, at lightweight, there's all sorts of fights for him still, even just domestically. So I think we'll see him back. He hasn't looked great, I agree, for a few years, to be honest. He hasn't really excited or looked at his best. It's a horrible thing to say, but it just felt like Kambosos just came. He was so up for it he was like a ball of energy, and Lisa was just not like that. And you can come unstuck because of that. He boxed well, but I just felt like he was just shipping too many shots, big left hooks and stuff like that. I think he can hold his own at lightweight, just maybe not at the upper echelons of the division. It's going to be hard to get near a world title because of all sorts that's going on. But I think we'll see him back. I don't think that's the end of him. It wasn't like he was beaten badly, but he was beaten handily. I'm sure there's still stuff out there for him. He's got a lot going on at home. He breeds dogs and ferrets and all sorts and quails and whatnot. So he goes away from boxing, does other things, but he lives and breathes it. He's in the gym all the time, and yeah, I feel like we'll see him back. It's interesting to see what changes he can make now, how he might develop from now, because what can he change? What can he do differently? But yeah, like George said, massive, great servant to British boxing, former world champion. He could walk away now, but I don't see him doing it.
Actually, I saw a post, George, from Shane McGuigan over the weekend. I think he did a Q&A and someone asked him, which fighter do you wish you'd worked with earlier? And he said yourself. Lee Selby, is there a point where you missed a chance to maybe, I mean, you obviously had success in McGuigan, so I'm not comparing it directly, but has Selby maybe missed the chance to move trainers, move camp, make a change in his career, or has he still got that sort of chance to do it now?
Yeah, I don't know. He's sometimes it can be a big change, an upheaval. If you're gonna all of a sudden do like a Leon Williams, I think he was based in probably near his home, training with Gary Lockett. I think he was at the start of someone in Wales, and now he's up at the Ingle gym with the guys up in Sheffield. So. That's a massive lifestyle change. If you've got a wife and kids at home, if you've got a bunch of dogs and ferrets that you don't want to leave behind, and the dream is to be like, I was talking to Andy Lee recently, who, he went to the Olympics. Manuel Stewart got in touch with him, up sticks, moved to Detroit. He spent time in New York, and then he was back in London when he left, and Manuel got ill, so he was training with Adam Booth, and he travelled around, but he's put his life on hold for that in many ways, and that's tough for a lot of fighters, especially when you've been a world champion and you're at this stage of your career. You get comfortable, but fighters do make changes, do move on. I wouldn't necessarily see it as a necessary thing that Selby needs to do. He's got a very particular style that was very effective for him for a huge part of his career. So it will be difficult now for him to make huge changes. He'll no doubt want to make slight changes. You always want to change and adapt and improve. But I don't think so, personally. It took a long way to say that. But yeah, I don't think he'll think about a change up now. I think as Dex says, if he loves boxing, then he'll just keep himself fit. He hasn't got to stress out about weight jumping up now. I'm sure he does put on a few pounds, and does have to take him off between fights. But he'll be in and out of the gym, keeping sane, and waiting for the phone to ring.
That is all for this part one, you could call it. Next up, we'll take a look at the super featherweight / lightweight divisions. Very complicated. Lots going on after Gervonta Davis' win over Leo Santa Cruz. So later on Saturday night, Gervonta Davis continued to impress with a 6th-round stoppage of Leo Santa Cruz. The fight was at super featherweight. There was a super featherweight and a lightweight belt on the line. There were also fans, almost 10,000 in Texas, all masked up, but nevertheless good to see fans slowly returning, at least on the other side of the Atlantic. So first of all, on the performance, Derek, you saw that the fight ended with the uppercut. He was going for that uppercut all fight, really landing with various levels of success, but absolutely beautiful. If you like ending.
Yeah, it's quality, isn't it? Like you say, he's looking for that uppercut, and to be honest, you would, wouldn't you, with a pressure fighter, a volume puncher like Santa Cruz, especially one who's smaller and lighter than you. You just absolutely. I think he landed one in the first round. He obviously knew that was going to be the key, and when it came, it was devastating. Gervonta Davis is such a talent. I said last week he should be an absolute superstar. He shouldn't be in fights where everyone knows what's going to happen before. We all knew what was going to happen to Santa Cruz based on size. The worrying thing, I know we'll get onto it, I'm jumping the gun a little bit. The worrying thing is Floyd Mayweather is already saying he should be the A side in the Teofimo Lopez fight. So we're already, we just see hurdles and hurdles and hurdles in the fights we actually want to see. But as far as that fight went, it was reasonably even, but I had Davis just ahead going into the 6th round when it got stopped, or not stopped, but when he closed the show. Such a sensational fighter, so exciting to watch. A little human wrecking ball, southpaw. Also, it was on Channel 5, which is another big shout for us and fans. Yeah, I mean, now it's just about what the next stage is for Davis, because we could quite easily see him not boxing now for a year, and then come back against another super bantamweight or something. It's hard to get too excited because I've been here before with him, and it lets you down. It's a bit like following the England football team. You wouldn't know about that, Martin, but
Thankfully not. George, let me put you on the spot. Which was better, his uppercut against Santa Cruz or Povetkin's against White?
Probably Povetkin's against White, just because been down twice before twice in the round before, and then technically both exceptional. Povetkin's was he dips left and left it to the body, dips left it to the body. This time, dip left, I'll bring it up through the middle. It's not rocket science, but it kind of is in the heavyweight division. So, you don't really get them well-schooled Olympians, getting to the very top in the amateur division. But Gervonta Davis, great. What a shot. What a shot. And I wrote down the same thing, kind of deck that from the get-go, he wants to. So when you got Southpaw versus Orthodox, you want to impose like you're almost like your positioning within the ring, but it's kind of like it's part footwork, part just the posturing. And I used to watch and study Luke Campbell, who used to throw this bolo shot from the southpaw position, and it's such an incredible shot. And then I used to love it. I used to do it throughout my career. I'm talking about myself too much here, but it's a free shot. And Davis
is that with your right hand?
So I'll be right hand. It's a backhand. It's a backhand.
Yeah, backhand.
Especially if you're fighting a southpaw. So I thought Jamie Cox, first defensive world title, stopped him with the same sort of shot. And it's lovely when you've got that mirror stance when you got Orthodox versus Southpaw, and that's who's going to win that sort of game, because when you're throwing that bolo shot, you've got so much target. When you're both Orthodox or you're both Southpaw, then you haven't got the entire peripheral of the torso in front of you to hit. And Davis was getting it off from the first round, and he's so neat and compact and punches so technically sound. His fundamentals are awesome. His balance must be brilliant. He generates so much power from his core and a stable base. I wouldn't say that I thought this was how it was going to end. I didn't think I wasn't convinced this was going to be a foregone conclusion that he was going to land this shot and put him away like that. Santa Cruz is an excellent fighter, brilliant fighter. And even though we're talking about the lightweights, they both made the super featherweight limit, so that was what the fight was. It wasn't even a lightweight fight. But a brilliant finish, great shot, great fight, two great fighters. But technically, an awesome fighter, Gervonta Davis. He's someone who, if you was a coach and you had young kids in the gym, you'd put his tape on and then analytically break down his technique, because it just looks old school. Looks like, other than that, you got to get out fighters from the 50s and black and white and try and find Joe Louis who can throw a hook from nothing and knock out a horse, people like that. Technically a very, very good fighter, great performance.
Declan, obviously you mentioned the future and whether or not we will see the fights, but if you just a brief look at the odds with Betfair for these potential matchups, just encapsulates how competitive these divisions, let's call it lightweight for now, would be. So were Gervonta Davis to fight Teofimo Lopez, it's basically a pick 'em with the odds. The same with Devin Haney. Lomachenko actually favoured to beat Gervonta Davis slightly. Again, not much in it. So in terms of the title picture, we don't know what Lopez is going to do yet. Devin Haney takes on Yorkis Gamboa next weekend, which we'll touch on briefly. What would be... Okay, let's just imagine you are a matchmaker with all the powers, and not even Floyd Mayweather can tell you what to do. What fight deck would you want to see Davis in next?
Personally, I've always wanted to see him against Lomachenko, because both of them not really lightweights. Both of them, Davis, made super feather this time. Like when they were both campaigning down there, a little bit more feather, super feather, and stylistically, I'd love to see it. Two southpaws don't always gel, but I think these one would. Lopez Davis has emerged as the big one, but again, I'm not sure that Lopez hangs around at lightweight to make it. And I would just find the Lomachenko fight so intriguing, even off the back of a defeat and everything else. I'd love to see that. I was always big on Lomachenko in that fight, but I think Davis is far cleverer than he's often given credit for. And when he was coming up, he was just walking through people, so he never got to see the nuance of it. But that's what I'd love to see. Whether or not we see it, they spoke about it a lot. Mayweather's played it down a lot. But yeah, if I had the power, that's the one I want to see. And I could see it for a vacant bout if Lopez was to walk away, for instance, or move up, rather, I should say.
Do you think I know Mayweather is an all-time great, a legend of the sport, George, but do you think there is any aspect of it being a disadvantage having him in Davis's corner in terms of the management side of it?
As a fight fan, definitely, because he might prevent the fights we want to see. You say Davis, who would you want to see him in against next? I'd love to see him in against Lopez, Lomachenko, Haney. Any of them would be probably a brilliant fight. Even I don't think it would be as competitive, but even in against like a Gamboa or someone like that, who's just technically just like a brilliant fighter. So Mayweather, he's an exceptional. He was an exceptional fighter, but an exceptional businessman in terms of the way that he had his career navigated, reinvented a genre of boxing, that people weren't necessarily accustomed to, where we're going to pay top dollar to watch an exhibition of skill. And even when you think he can get rid of this guy, he'll just play it safe and go through the rounds. And I don't think you're going to get that out of Gervonta Davis, but that element of protection that every fighter needs, but can prevent the big fights from happening. Maybe Mayweather might be that guy who puts too much value on his fighter and prices him out of big fights. I don't know, in many ways, it's fantastic to have someone like Floyd Mayweather talking about you. It's only gonna add value to a certain degree, but as long as it doesn't get in the way of you progressing your career and being involved in the big fights, because at the end, to have your legacy, you've got to have beaten the bigger names and won the belts, to look back on. So I don't know, but I think I agree with you, Dec. I think the Lomachenko fight would be great for Davis. I think a Lomachenko favourite. I think it's another fight like Lopez. Lomachenko does tend to go into his shell a little bit, and when he's in with a big puncher who might land something on him, and therefore lose rounds. You say like if Lomachenko fights Lopez, in one way, Lopez, he's got to stop him to win. But when you think about it with hindsight, you're like, no, if he just has enough of an effect throughout the round, Lomachenko's such a skillful, clever fighter. He's not going to let himself get knocked out. He might go into his shell, but just not pick up the rounds and lose the rounds and end up losing on points. It might be the same in a Gervonta Davis fight, where Davis technically very good, but punches much harder than Lomachenko. So, but yeah, Haney as well, who's had a meteoric rise to the top. Still haven't got his age down, but he's still got to be early 20s at most. Coming up to the top of his game, that'll be a brilliant fight. WBC world champion, but you come to that debate later. I think Lopez is the WBC world champion, and Haney's some alternative version. So fantastic division though, brilliant division, loads of exciting fights, and I'm sure they will get made because they have to.
I think Lopez has coined Haney as an email champion, which is a bit disrespectful, but I actually quite like it. I think it's very fair. He was obviously made the world champion by when Lomachenko was installed as the franchise champion, and I imagine it probably was done by email. Such is 2020. Maybe
it might be the facts, Martin, with these guys. South Americans, they like the facts from time to time.
That's good enough for Lionel Messi. So you mentioned Haney takes on Yorkis Gamboa next weekend, or this weekend coming. Sorry, Deca. The odds 25 to 1 on for Haney. Gamboa 10 to 1. A fair reflection. Gamboa, of course, we let's not belittle his achievements or chances, but obviously coming to the end of his career now.
Yeah. Gamboa's best days well behind him. Sort of recycled opponent now, and Devin Haney far too fresh, too young, too powerful. He'll stop him inside the distance handily, and he'll have a belt around the shoulder at the end, shouting about people. But it's another one of these fights where it's like, there's so many better people that I'd rather see him fight right now. But given his age and everything else, sometimes you can forget that how young and inexperienced actually he is, and because of the way he's pushed and everything else, that maybe this is the right kind of an opponent for him at this stage. I would argue not. You can say that if you're not saying you're the WBC champion at the same time. You know, you can take learning fights and whatever. If you're saying you're the number one, then you need to be fighting opponents that reflect that. But let's hope that he, gets this one out of the way, and then he moves on, and then we do start seeing these fights, because the problem is they're not fighting that often anyway these days, generally, especially not at the moment. So when you get a fight like that, it's a bit like Davis. He's fighting Santa Cruz in a okay matchup, but so many other fighters you'd rather see him fight, and then you don't see him for ages again. Let's hope it's not the same with Haney. I think he's an absolute superstar waiting to happen. So young, so charismatic, and obviously brilliant fighter. He's part of that vanguard of like young fighters like Ryan Garcia as well, to a slightly lesser extent, but in that same picture with Teofimo Lopez as well. And it is exciting as a boxing fan to see that the sport is going to be, is going to be represented by these young guys who've got another 10 years left in the game, and they're already right there at the forefront. But yeah, as far as Gamboa goes, I don't see it being a particularly nice evening for him.
I don't like to assume anything with WBC, but surely, assuming Haney comes through, he will, at worst, and still be a great fight, of course, fight the winner of Luke Campbell against Ryan Garcia. And they can just maybe tidy things up in terms of, or Teofimo Lopez, and just tidy things up in terms of where actually everyone is ranking. But you're right, we now, if we can separate by age, if you like, you've got Haney, Davis, and Lopez, and Garcia. So those four, whatever happens with Luke Campbell will go on longer than Campbell will, and then you've got Campbell, Lomachenko. It's I guess you always worry, maybe as a promoter as well in boxing, that you might have this gap when legends of the sport or the older generation retire. But at least at lightweight, we're looking at a decade possibly of these, let's call those four youngsters, that just hopefully fighting each other, but at least providing year in, year out with top fights.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at the Scandi type, like German boxing model, where they was unable to bring the talent through, So once Arthur Abraham got past his best, and you had, Sturm and even the Klitschko's, but they sort of did their own thing. They wasn't always into developing new talent anyway. But now, German boxing was at the forefront, 5-10 years ago. Now, not so much. So you're always worried about bringing the fighters through. And it's up to like the promoters and the matchmakers to match them properly and develop them and make sure that they're well on their way. But I think the lightweight division, I'm trying to have a good think. But you've got some older names in there, as you say, with Lomachenko and Campbell. But with the young fighters there as well, bright future. They might. Gervonta Davis obviously up and down between super feather and lightweight, and Lopez might be moving up, and then all the belts get scattered again, and there's a free for all. But it's exciting fights. Camboso as well from the weekend, energetic, not the youngest, but still mid to late 20s. Gonna have a good few years left, and interesting character in the division. So yeah, great. Promoters can sleep at ease, I think. Anyone who's got any fighters there in that division at least. And yeah, hopefully the WBC kind of gets tightened up a little bit about who is champion. Because I get it. Sometimes I get it. Like whatever name you want to give your super champion. I mean, I was a super champion, so I'm never going to totally disrespect it if you're going to have multiple world champions for a governing body. But it ends up coming out of a good place, where a champion's maybe laid up with injury or some contractual problems, and the sport has to roll on. But once you've created that, once you've opened the door for that, then it's hard to take it away. But when there is an opportunity to do that and clean it up and have one champion, I think it should be. And whether that be Haney has to step up and fight Lopez. If they're both champions in the time being, then in the years to come, then that's great. But if Lopez decides to move up a weight and vacate, then sort of the franchise belt should then just sort of disappear. But there's going to be some promoter out there who sees, that WBC franchise belt as up for grabs, and they're going to make a fight that's on paper too good to turn down, and it has to be made. So yeah, no, can't be moaning. No more moans.
Okay, well, in that case, I want to ask this, even if it does lead to a moan. When Devin Haney puts his head on the pillow at night, switches off the light, does he believe he is a world champion?
I think he believes he's the best fighter in the world. He's the best breed. I genuinely think that's what he thinks. So I don't reckon he cares. And I'm sure he thinks, well, I'm going to beat this guy anyway. Well, he's the champion, but I beat him. So I'm not sure there's much introspection going on from Devin Haney necessarily. He believes in himself as much as anyone else, as much as any other fighter on the planet. So, yeah, it's not his fault either that he's got elevated like this. He's hardly going to bat it away, is he? It's a mess made by the WBC, but I do think that it'll be the proper champion at some point. So yeah, he gets a bit of stick for it, but I would say it's the WBC's fault.
I think just to jump in, an elevation to world championship status shouldn't be a thing. Like, you should always have to fight for your world title, and as a fighter, that's what you want. I mean, Haney's had a defense of his world title, but he's kind of never won the world title. He's never prepared for a world title fight. He's kind of been robbed of that, even if he was fighting for a vacant, WBC world title, knowing that there's a franchise champion out there, it would have a slightly different feeling. I agree with Dek. He 100% believes he's world champion, and he is, so he should do. But elevating someone to world champion, I just never get that, unless there was a controversy, someone testing positive for, a banned substance or something along those lines, or even just a diabolical decision. I get that. But you being the interim champion or something of the equivalent, and the world, the full world title goes vacant, then you should be next in line to fight for that, not just automatically elevated to world champion. Bizarre, real bizarre, because say you lose your next fight, you never actually won a world title, and yet you've been world champion. It's, for me, just makes no sense.
Well, if anyone wants to elevate us up various podcast YouTube lists, I'm sorry, I had to get it in. Please feel free. We will not complain at all. And that is all we have for this week. We'll be back next week to look at Devin Haney's performance and also preview, as I mentioned earlier, that female-dominated card featuring Terry Harper, Katie Taylor and Rachel Ball in a couple of weeks' time. Please do join us then.